Hello, I'm Tom Martin, and welcome to another episode of A San Francisco Conservative, the new podcast series featuring yours truly, Tom Martin. I'm a longtime journalist. I've produced stories for Diane Sawyer at ABC Good Morning America, Charles Kuralt at CBS News, CNN, and on and on and on. And I love asking thought-provoking questions. I love learning new things, and that is why I am here. And I am honored to be joined by our co-host of this great podcast series, David Parker from San Francisco. David is the author of Income and Wealth and a San Francisco conservative. Welcome, David. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Good.
I enjoy your new background today.
I know. I usually have a team that wheels in a huge picture of the Golden Gate Bridge right behind me, but I think they're on vacation today. Good help is hard to find, but sorry about that.
Yeah, global warming. Yeah,
that's right. I blame it on global warming. But at any rate, it's very nice to be with you. I am in Connecticut, although I missed my beautiful photo of the Golden Gate Bridge. But it's great to be with you. And there have been a couple topics in the news recently that reminded me of your writing, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, kind of get a new take on these situations. One is, I know you've written about law and order. Again, during the Trump years, he was saying, I'm the law and order president. And then the next thing you know, the FBI agents show up at his doorstep at Mar-a-Lago. We'll see how that all works out. But I recently heard a former police commissioner from New York City say, well, there's some good news and some bad news. The good news is that murder rates are down. To look at the headlines my fellow journalists are putting out, you'd think that murder is really up. So I guess that's good news. But he said bad news is that for many other crimes, so-called victimless crimes and so on, auto theft, larceny, where people walk into a store and carry away, armloads of Gucci purses and whatever, it's up. He says that the perpetrators know the judges will not put them in jail. So why not? You have some thought-provoking ideas about law and order. What are your thoughts about all that?
It's like graffiti. If someone paints a wall or a freeway where they shouldn't, you really have to cover that over right away, or else word gets out that this is a spot we can go to. And if someone commits some crime, they purposely drop a candy wrapper on the sidewalk, prison immediately, 1 hour, because then everyone gets the message. And when everyone gets the message, you don't have to build thousands of prisons. You don't have to lock up thousands of people. The word gets out, they're enforcing the law. Who knew? But if you do like thieves from New Jersey, let's rob in New York, because if we're caught, they're not going to tie us up because there's no room in the prisons. That person has to be tied up. I don't mean tied up, has to be put in prison. And they have to figure that out. They have to find a warehouse, or they have to find a military base, or they have to find some place to put people that word can never get out, that we're not painting over graffiti and we're not putting criminals in prison for a little while, at least, so that everybody knows that nobody's excused. Nobody's above the law. The president's not above the law, and neither is a petty theft. Otherwise, there's no cure. There's no end to it.
Mm-hmm. And what do you make of some of these protest movements saying defund the police? That's never really made sense to me, but what do you think about that?
What they're really saying is, don't have the police solve social problems. Don't have them be talking to residents and coming into their house and sit down with them with their guns in their hand. Let a social worker talk to people who need social work. There's some truth to that. But when you say defund the police, that really gets your attention. So, and that's good too, in a way. You have to get people's attention. But nobody wants to defund the police, especially in a rough neighborhood. The residents in those neighborhoods are saying, no, we don't want that either. But yeah, there has to be some discretion, some nuance in policing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And speaking of social problems, I guess it falls in the category of social problems. Another story that's been in the news recently is in Jackson, Mississippi. Apparently, the water quality is terrible. In fact, I don't know if it's an exaggeration, it could be fatal if you drink the water coming out of your tap. But it's a major crisis right now for, Mississippi is certainly an impoverished state, and Jackson is the capital, but I would imagine it's a rather impoverished city also. And they said, well, I think it's a largely African-American population. And they said, well, look at what happened a few years ago in Flint, Michigan, which of course also has a largely African-American population. And, who knows whether it's racial discrimination, but it's an issue. And I certainly feel for the people and the children and so on of Jackson, Mississippi. How would you attack a problem like that?
That's like purposely dropping a candy wrapper. The city cannot make an excuse why they let the water go bad. And if a city is heavily Black, there's a good chance there's probably a few people in government who are Black. So you can't blame it on discrimination totally. And it's their job. And the government has a few functions. And one of it is protecting life, liberty, and property. Well, that's life. You can't have citizens drinking bad water. So they may have to cut some programs that are superfluous, or even if they're not primary. Primary is water, and property taxes everywhere in the nation are essentially go to education. So cities have no right to close schools, and they have no right to drop their police departments, and they have no right to drop health standards for drinking water or building standards in construction. In really poor countries, that's one thing that goes if they're really poor, they're corrupt, and buildings fall during earthquakes, and they fall during even minor catastrophes because people stole equipment or it was never properly monitored. That's what government is for, is to protect. It's not to provide social services. It's to protect citizens. That's why we have government. That's the founding father image, and it's my image.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I want to shift gears a little bit. And before we do that, I just want to remind those of you who are joining us midstream here in this episode, this is the new podcast series, A San Francisco Conservative, featuring yours truly, Tom Martin, journalist, asking the questions, and my friend David Parker, author of Income and Wealth and A San Francisco Conservative. It's the title of his latest book, offering some real food for thought here. So I just want to move along to, again, thinking of the children of Jackson, Mississippi, and of Flint, Michigan, and everywhere. You're a grandfather, and you were a teacher for 40, 50 years for very young students in San Francisco's public schools. I was just curious if you have any suggestions on what children should be taught about money. A lot of your books focus on money and finance and the economic system. The young children are probably not quite ready to read your two books, but you have a gift for rapport with children, and you've inspired probably a couple generations there. What should children know about money? What would good parents teach their children?
You can't get too subtle about money with children because they haven't dealt with the subject, and even their parents may not have dealt with the subject. But you can say one simple thing is that kids, you should save 10% or half of what anybody gives you. Your uncle gives you some money, half goes into an account. And kids, when they see that account build up, they get a little bit excited. So it's self-affirming. Pretty soon they're putting 3/4 into that account when they see it's really building. My grandson says, I got $2,000 in my account. My uncle gave me this, and my aunt gave me that, and my grandfather gave me this. And I realized that's actually, there it is. That's all you have to say to a kid. You save half your money, and then you don't have to know why. That'll come later. And then you can teach your kid that he should maybe make an investment with it when he can. Maybe he can buy a stock or something, or get used to thinking in those terms. But that's all.
Is that idea of building habits, starting habits and maybe starting habits young, is that important?
Yeah, no. When I was a kid in elementary school, they had Bank Day. Bank of America in California had little envelopes with a string that tied. Every Friday, you brought whatever dimes and nickels you had, and some monitor would pick it up, and all that would go to a big box in the office, and and someone would walk it down to the bank, and some poor teller would have to open up all those envelopes. And all those kids had little accounts, and I loved that. And the bank stopped doing that when they realized that the paperwork and was more than they weren't getting any money, but it was, somebody had a nice idea, and I never forgot that.
That's great. That's great.
Never forgot that.
Love that. I remember.
Yeah, it started a habit. It started a habit of putting aside some money. Professional investment is something else. You use other people's money. You heard that expression, but you don't tell that to a kid. It's too much. You'll discourage them. Just save.
Yeah. That it can be fun, and you can just watch it, just a fun habit to start. Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I remember, I was just wondering, you're a very successful entrepreneur and investor, and I'm sure many fellow entrepreneurs. I was just wondering if there, how to instill that spirit, whether it's taught or ingrained in our DNA or something like that. I remember back around, I guess, 1999, I was producing a series for CNN on business people. And we interviewed, I guess, one of the founders of Atari. There weren't that many video games out then. That was years ago. But apparently he had a little wagon. He'd take door to door and sell something, pencils or whatever. So he was entrepreneurial even at a very early age. And even today, in 2022, I see every once in a while see kids with a little card table and lemonade. That's never gone out of style somehow. But do you think children can be taught to be entrepreneurial, or can we encourage that spirit in children?
I'm not sure, because I remember a child, when I was finally old enough to have a paper route. Man, did I go after those people. I wrote a letter to the newspaper. I grabbed the supervisor of that paper boy's route. Said, I want that paper route when that kid retires. I hustled that thing, and then I got it. And then I was delivering papers after school with a bag on, with the papers on my back, on the front knee. Got my sister to help me. And none of my friends were doing that. And then when I got a little older, I was in a neighborhood that had a lot of public vegetation. It was, and that wasn't being watered by the city. It was kind of a private, and they needed somebody, or I told them they needed somebody to water these things during the summertime, and they hired me. I'm out in front watering all these shrubbery and road dividers, and all my friends are joining me. They're playing ball and watching me work. It's like Huckleberry Finn. I could have, Tom Sawyer, I could have given them the hose. Here, you guys water. It's so much fun. So I was hustling from day one.
Yeah, and it sounds like you still do that. You still, you enjoy looking for opportunities, right?
I drive my wife nuts. I'm looking at an office building in downtown San Francisco. Don't tell her. And I can't resist it. It's vacant. Yes, I'll do something with this. Yeah. The seller is going to be surprised at the terms I'm offering, but I'm willing to and it's a small, I'll convert them into little apartments temporarily, and this, hold it for 5 years and see what happens. Yeah. Maybe it'll come back. It's not a real bad location. Yeah, I can't help it.
I love it. That's great. And it's with children going back to school, whatever age they may be, kindergarten, college. I have a son who's still in college. Are there certain things that you would encourage children to learn that'll benefit them later? I mean, I know we've talked about the education system in America right now, that it needs a little bit of work, or a lot of work, but with the new school season getting underway, do you have any thoughts or suggestions?
I can give a very general, almost philosophic. Bill Bradley, who was a senator and he played with the Knicks, he said, get as much experience in every possible field as you can. Because when you're finding on the job, you can't really learn on the job. You better bring depth with you. So study everything. I like that when I heard that. I tend to do that. And as a school teacher, you're entitled, they don't do it so much anymore, but I did get a sabbatical 1 year, paid for it. But you have to do a little studying. You couldn't just sit there on the couch. But they said you can study anything. You don't have to study what your major was. You don't have to study what you were teaching. Just bring more depth to what you're doing. You can study anything you want. That reinforced that notion. I like that. That was San Francisco Public Schools. That was correct, I thought, in my mind.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And that's certainly quality that you bring to your books. I always use that expression. You're in the trenches. You're not tucked away in some scholar's office at the university or something. It makes a big difference in terms of what we read in your books. I mean, I really like that quality.
Yeah. All my books, all my examples are almost personal experience or from history. For thousands of years, what I'm saying, this is how it played out in different times. And that things aren't different today than they were in the past. We only have technology, and that really translates into be a better medical treatment. People don't die from silly things like they did in the past. That's the only difference. The thought process is the same. Other personal problems and family problems and societal problems are the same.
Yeah.
I like to say Aristotle, you read him, you think he's talking today. If I didn't tell you I'm reading directly from Aristotle, you would not know. He talks and like we do, and on the same subjects we're talking about. That blows me away.
Amazing, amazing. And I guess I just wanted to share this as we close or hear your thoughts about this. But earlier today, I had a nice call from my son, Eric. He's 21 years old. He's started college, his last year of college down in Washington, D.C. And he interviewed recently with an investment firm there in Washington. He'd had a couple of weeks internship this summer. And so they're interested in offering him a part-time job. And I said, well, my friend David Parker recently said, based on his reading of Andrew Carnegie and so on, he said, there's really a lot to be said by starting in the mailroom. He said, well, the things they might give me to do might be kind of menial. And I said, well, you know what I've heard from my friend David Parker. So what are your thoughts about, a situation like that?
If you don't start at the bottom, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. You can't say, I don't know this, I don't know that, I don't need to know it. You can't say that. You have to know it. And you don't know how this applies, but if you start in the mailroom, you see who's getting all the mail. This person's getting all the mail, and that's not the CEO. The CFO is getting all the mail or something like that. You make some discovery, and once you made a few discoveries, get out of there and do something else. Join the custodial department of that firm. Start sweeping the hallways first thing in the morning, and you see who shows up first. It's probably not the CEO either, and it might not be who you think it is. And the person who shows up early all the time, that might be a person on his way up, and he knows something, and you start talking to him, and then you find yourself, you have an insight with somebody who appreciates that you were there in the morning like he was there, and you have maybe start a camaraderie. You don't know what you're going to find out and what opportunities are going to come. You start at the bottom. If you start in the middle, you are not going to rise to the top.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Great advice. Great advice. I'll be sure to share this episode with my son, in fact. Thank you. Thank you. I think we're out of time for this time. I always enjoy our conversations. And I just want to let people know, I really encourage you to go to David's website to purchase copies of his books, Income and Wealth and a San Francisco Conservative. His website is davidparkeressays.com, and you can also purchase his books through Amazon. So thanks very much. It was great to see you.
All right, great to be here. Thank you.